And welcome to the March meeting of the Bulloch County Historical Society. I say with pride that I saw many of you yesterday. And for those of you that were there, I'm going to say kumbaya. And I think you know what I'm saying. Obviously, again, I'm not Joe McGlamry. He's one of my best friends and mentor, but he had something come up at work and hopes to join us for the program as soon as he can get from downtown Statesboro. We have lots of special guests today. Tyler Hendricks is our guest speaker, and his parents are with us, along with his fiance and another graduate student from Georgia Southern. So let's give them a round of applause. We have a first-time member with us, Jill Boykin. I'm not sure where, there's Jill. Thank you. And folks, we have some brand new members today. Make my week. And they are a lifetime friend, Brenda Forbes, and Richard Chamberlain, who is here with City Council lady, Sherry Wall, and Holly Sawyer, who is with her mama, Joy, who's one of our fine members from the Portal High Society group. They know what I'm talking about. We also have special guests they're not guests. A lot of us, they've been members forever, but they're not with us often. From Augusta, Georgia, we have Carrie and Dave Welter. And we have a guest of FM and Ross Jones, Joe Aldrich, who's fixing to join too. So, what a great day in BCHS. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us a corporate member. And we have approximately 80 corporate members in our society, and each one of these organizations or businesses give us $250 a year. That's quite an investment in our society. Today we honor Morris Bank, and I have to say that they have supported us from the very first corporate membership drive that our dear Billy Griffiths had. How many years ago, Billy? 6, 7? When we started corporate members, Joe McGlamry was smart enough to get Billy Griffiths. So thank you, Billy. And I would like to ask Bill to please come forward, and John Roach and Trish Tootle of Morris Bank, because we're going to present them their corporate certificate today. Y'all wait on the Society's photographer, Miss Laura, to come forward. Yes, please. Look at Trish. I'm telling you.
All right, now you tell us where to go here.
I'll get the middle.
How we look?
No, look at me.
Great. And if y'all would, please give our corporate member, Morris Bank, a round of applause. And I think it's appropriate that at least once a year we kind of review this. We are all very grateful for the financial support we receive from the Averett Foundation. These dollars allow for us to have historical markers, a Bulloch County puppet show that all 1,000 Bulloch County third graders get to come to. We publish books like the Hodges Family and Cato and Reed incidents. And we have an annual event like we did yesterday. And it goes on and on. But these monies are very specific. They do not pay for the running of our society. They do not pay for monthly meeting luncheon costs. They do not pay to rent this fabulous facility. They do not pay for the outstanding newsletter, which is edited by our own Jenny Voss and also the editor of the fabulous Statesboro magazine. And also we have 80 lifetime members that no longer contribute any monies to our group. Also, our tidbits are paid for by a grant from the Georgia Humanities that I've applied for the past 2 years, and we were very lucky to receive both times. So, without corporate members' support, our dues would probably have to double, which I've looked around in most societies like Augusta and Savannah, et cetera, Valdosta, are double what ours are. And the cost per lunch, I'll get it, and the cost of lunch per person would have to be a lot more than $12.50. All of us attend DAR and Garden Club and other clubs where we pay $25 and $30 a lunch for the same kind of lunch we have. So, with that in mind, thank you, John, thank you, Trish, and all of our other corporate members that allow us to run a society without raising these costs. And so now, I would like to call our Vice President, Brent Tharp, who's finishing up that wonderful barbecue, and he's leaving cheesecake. Y'all don't know, it's a joke between us. Can I come get it?
No, these folks too, it better be.
Exactly. So I'm looking very forward to our program today that Brent and his graduate student have to, and let's show them a good BCHS welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here and great to welcome our speaker today, Tyler Hendricks. Tyler was born in Durango, Colorado, and grew up all over the United States. His father was in the Army for 15 years and moved around, but fortunately, Georgia snagged him in 2012. He started at Georgia Southern University as an undergraduate in 2016 and earned a BA in history in 2019. Then he started the master's program in history at Georgia Southern University in August of 2020 and is finishing up here in May with a concentration, a master's in history with a concentration in public history. So this is a really wonderful resource that we have here, and so the presentation he brings to you today is his research and his work related to his project and his master's in history at Georgia Southern. I want to introduce, he has with us Bruce and Jolene Hendricks, his parents, who are delighted that they're here with us today to watch this, but also his fiancee, Alyssa Watrous. Alyssa is also in the master's program. And I've teased these two for a long time, that what you don't do in a graduate program is start dating people with the same degree, because you don't find two jobs for two people in history at the same place. Fortunately, these two have made a liar out of me. And so I'm delighted to announce that, in fact, in May, Tyler will become the lead archivist with the Thronotista Heritage Museum in Albany. And Alyssa will be the lead educator for the Thronotista Heritage Center. So how nice that they not only have this incredible work that they've done for us, but they are doing exactly what we want, walking right out into these fantastic jobs. And Albany and Georgia will benefit a great deal from their work. I want to mention real quickly here before I turn this over to Tyler as well, that Alyssa is doing a presentation tomorrow. And if anybody is interested, at 12:30 at the Henderson Library in the main atrium, she is presenting on her work, More Than Meets the Eye, How Georgia Southern Women Transformed the Women's Army Corps. So with that, we're delighted that Tyler could be here with us today and present on this incredible work, so please welcome him.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Tyler Hendricks, and I'm a graduate student in the Public History program at Georgia Southern University. Today, I want to speak to you about the history of mules, as well as my graduate capstone project, entitled Something Southern, A History of Mules in South Georgia. This project was accomplished as a joint partnership between the Georgia Southern University Museum and Dave and Carrie Walter. Before we get into the specifics of my graduate project, I want to discuss the history of mules from ancient times to the middle of the 20th century. To begin, we need to know two things. What is a mule? And why were they historically important to South Georgia? A mule is a hybrid that is created by breeding a female horse, otherwise known as a mare, with a male donkey, otherwise known as a jack. Mules are naturally occurring equine hybrids in nature, where they have been known to humans for thousands of years. While mules are naturally occurring, they are, with very few documented exceptions, completely sterile and are unable to reproduce. Under human domestication, mules became widely prized for their stamina and durability when working, but they have also become famous for their extreme and frequent stubbornness. And believe me, I've experienced this last trait firsthand in the course of my project. Equines, and by extension, mules, were initially domesticated by the Sumerians, located in present-day Iraq, over 5,000 years ago. In Sumer, mules were first recorded when domestic horses began breeding with local wild donkeys and onagers, and their use gradually increased over the next several thousand years. By classical antiquity between the 8th century BCE and the 6th century CE, mules became widely valued for their work in pulling wagons and carts, and they, along with horses and oxen, formed the backbone of the entire transportation and communications network of the Roman Empire. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, mules were utilized in regional and continental trade networks, including the famous Silk Road between Asia and Europe. Later, mules accompanied Spanish conquistadors in their conquest and exploitation of South America, where they are used to carry precious minerals from South American mines into the global trade network. After the American Revolution, President George Washington imported the first Spanish jack donkeys into the newfound United States, where they formed the basis of the layered mule industry in the 19th century. In the United States, mules were utilized in a wide variety of tasks. Throughout the country, mules pulled carts and wagons transporting people and goods for commerce and trade. In the turpentine, timber, and mining industries, mules hauled raw naval stores, felled trees, and raw ore away to the processors. In construction projects, large teams of mules hauled heavy wagons containing discarded earth to be disposed of off-site and returned with building materials to allow further construction to continue. Mule-powered grinders flattened the earth for public roads and railroads alike. Their most famous use was in agriculture, especially in the southern cotton and tobacco fields, where farmers utilized mule draft power to plow and cultivate their fields in the spring and to haul their harvest away to market in the fall. In the fields, farmers valued mules over horses and oxen due to their narrower stance, which made them significantly less likely to step on plants. The South, including Georgia, never produced mules in significant numbers. The majority of mules produced in the United States came from Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Texas. Hundreds of thousands of miles away from the ultimate consumers in the South and the West. To facilitate this mass movement of mules, a robust mule trading industry formed between the producers and the consumers. In this mule trading industry, mule producers sold their produced mules to traders who transported stock to the end users at regional markets via railroad. During the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, states were evolved into a major mule market and eventually ranked second in the state behind Atlanta. In 1907, 2 local mule traders sold 280 mules in only 2 months. And in 1914, the Bulloch Times reported that the local market had sold over 1,200 mules in the 1913 to 1914 season. After World War I, the mule market began to decline until it ended completely by the beginning of the 1930s. Mules had a significant impact on the culture of Georgia and the South. For tenant farmers and sharecroppers, mule ownership symbolized a path for economic advancement, where mule ownership meant they could negotiate for better rental terms from the landowner. Throughout the South, mules became a major subject of stories told between people of all standings. They influenced a significant number of the songs created and sung by people throughout the South, including works like Mule on the Mount, and commercial songs like Barclay's Long Boy, Goodbye Ma, Goodbye Pa, Goodbye Mule, with your old hee-haw. The most long-lasting impact that mules had on the South, however, was in our vernacular and our phrasings. To this day, we still commonly use phrases like kicks like a mule and stubborn as a mule to describe actions and experiences in everyday speech. Mules were owned and utilized by white and African American farmers alike between the end of the Civil War and World War II. During this time period, over 80% of all residents of Bulloch County lived on farms. In Bulloch County, 60% of all farms were owned or rented by white farmers, while the remainder were owned or rented by African Americans. For members of both races, mules represented an avenue to improve socioeconomic standings. However, the local newspapers at the time, particularly the Bulloch County, or the Bulloch Times and Statesboro News, rarely reported African Americans and mules together. They instead focused their reporting on the mules owned and utilized by white men. When African Americans were mentioned in newspaper articles, these reports contained overt signs of racism. For example, in a report about the opening of a segregated school in Statesboro in the Bulloch Times from September 1909, one of the speakers at the grand opening ceremony told the gathered African American crowd to forego education in favor of working behind a mule on the farm. The decline of mules in the South has had several overlapping causes, and no single factor was wholly responsible for the transition away from mules and towards tractors. These include the introduction of automobiles and affordable tractors in the first 2 weeks of the 20th century, the boll weevil and the destruction of the cotton as a consistent cash crop, the disruption of the mule market by the mass exportation of mules during World War I, and the Great Depression. At the beginning of the 20th century, industrial manufacturers invented internal combustion engines small enough to be mounted in automobiles, and people across the country gradually began purchasing them for use. In October 1905, the first automobile entered Statesboro, but it entered under very unique circumstances. The car, which had been purchased the day before in Savannah by Mr. L.F. Davis, broke down on the way to Statesboro and had to be pulled into town by a farm mule. Shortly thereafter, the Statesboro City Council temporarily barred cars from entering town during daylight hours, but this measure did not last long. By March 1920, mules had become a rare sight on Statesboro's streets, and cars had taken their place. In 1914, the boll weevil, a pest beetle that feeds on cotton buds and flowers, entered Georgia from the Alabama border. Within a decade, the boll weevil had decimated the cotton crop throughout Georgia, and the remaining unaffected crop suffered from consistently low prices throughout the late 19-teens and the early 1920s. Combined, these factors led to the failure of hundreds of farms and the economic migration of tens of thousands of farmers and their families, as well as the associated divestment of mules. During World War I, the Allies purchased hundreds of thousands of American mules for service on the Western Front. The mass exportation of mules for the war reduced the supply available for Southern farmers, and the market only slowly rebounded after the war. Immediately after the end of World War I, the Beeman tractor, the first affordable tractor released in Statesboro, released onto the market, and several other designs quickly followed suit. The tractor had several key advantages over the mule. They did not require daily upkeep. They're easier to handle for a wider range of people, and they're not nearly as stubborn. Within a few years, tractors were actively competing with mules for agricultural roles on farms throughout the South. At the same time, the Great Depression started in 1929, decimating the national economy and forcing millions of people out of work, including Southern farmers. To help combat this, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the first New Deal into law, including the Agricultural Adjustment Administration in 1933 and 1934. The administration paid Southern farmers a stipend to destroy significant amounts of their annual cotton crops. While the stipend assisted many farmers at the time, the drastic reduction of the cotton crop also reduced the number of mules required to work the remaining crop, and thousands were also put out of work. Combined, these impacts served to reduce the need for mules as well as introduce a competing mechanical implement almost simultaneously. Within a few decades, the results were telling, as hundreds of thousands of mules were divested and replaced by tractors by the 1950s. In my graduate capstone project, I sought to examine the history and impact of mules in South Georgia between the end of the Civil War in 1865 to the beginning of the United States involvement in World War II in 1941. The project was intended to research these impacts, then produce an exhibit and a historical marker detailing my findings. The project was guided by Dr. Brett Tharp and the Walter family. It was advised by an academic committee chaired by Dr. Lisa Denmark in the Department of History. Dr. Alan Downs and Dr. Michael Van Wagenen also joined as advisors. The Something Southern project produced 4 separate components: a physical exhibit, a complementary digital component, a documentary film, and a proposed historical marker text. The physical exhibit analyzes the history and impact of mules through the lens of 6 distinct themes. These were the history of mules in Georgia, mules at work, mules in a race, Georgia culture and the mule, mule trading in Statesboro, and the decline of mules. The exhibit will be located in the Cultural Hall of the Georgia Southern University Museum, and it will open in the next few weeks and remain open throughout next April. The exhibit utilizes a selection of archival photos from the Georgia Archives and the Library of Congress, as well as artifacts on loan from the Georgia Southern University Botanic Gardens, as well as the Walter family. The digital component acts as an extension of the physical exhibit, and it will be available for access through a scannable QR code located at the physical exhibit. The website is hosted on the Georgia Southern University Library's LibGuides website design system, where it will continue to be maintained by the university in perpetuity. The digital component contains information about the project, the GSU Public History Graduate Program, and the Walter Johnson Heritage Site, as well as further archival photos of mules working in South Georgia. The digital component also provides visitors with further readings and videos about the history and impact of mules, as well as information about traditional cane boils in the coastal plain of Georgia. Most significantly, the digital component hosts the project's documentary film. The documentary film, entitled Georgia Cane Boils, A Dying Tradition, and produced in partnership with filmmakers Abby Hoeksema and Dr. Dean Cummings in the Georgia Southern University Communication Arts Department, details traditional sugar cane boils in Georgia. Cane boils were events where farmers pressed sugar cane stalks to release the contained juice, then boiled the juice into a thicker syrup to preserve it for later use in items that required the use of refined sugar, such as baking. These boils were oftentimes community events where family and friends gathered together to celebrate the harvest. Traditionally, the cane stalks were pressed in a mule-powered grinder, but they were often done with tractors after they were adopted after the 1920s. The film documents the annual cane boil hosted by the Walter family from October 2021. The event was highlighted by the use of a mule for the grinding of cane stalks, likely the first such occurrence in Bulloch County in this millennium. Today, I'd like to show you all the completed version of Georgia cane boils. Essentially is a process where sugarcane stalks are squeezed into juice, and that juice is boiled into cane syrup.
The cane boil is very important for tradition's sake.
I did not mean to hit that. Can you rewind it? I apologize.
And the other
essentially is a process where sugarcane stalks are squeezed into juice, and that juice is boiled into cane syrup.
The cane boil is very important for tradition's sake. We do it for a number of reasons. One, to carry on the tradition of cane boiling and cane grinding, and the other is to provide a social activity for family and friends. And we're always conscious of trying to remember the past. These are childhood memories for me, and we just would like for our children and grandchildren and other people their ages to know about it.
For her, it was tradition. For me, it was a challenge to see if we could do this.
I started this around 2001 or 2. We've done it all my life. I've got pictures of me as a baby around the syrup pot. You use syrup for basically everything. You didn't go to town just to buy sugar.
That was the only source of sugar that they had. You know, if you lived 20 miles from town, it'd take you all day to get to town and to get syrup, because there wasn't refined sugar at that time. So it was an absolute necessity.
This is the cane stripper, and it's a unique thing. I think my dad may have made it, or maybe Dave. I'm not sure. This looks more like Dave with fancy stuff on the end. So to get a good grip on it, because you have to have a good grip. And you come up as high as you can, and that high as you can, and you start about here, a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you start down, and you strip. It really takes a strong person.
And then you want to leave some, right? So that it'll come back the next year.
Right. So give it a whack with a machete. Now these cane leaves are very, very sharp. You have to be very careful with, because they will cut you easily. But when I was a child, I ran through the cane field with my nephew, and we would just cut pieces.
You cut it right about there.
Right there. All right?
Well, the mule would provide the industrial power, kind of like the classic version of an ox or a horse. They would provide the power needed to propel something. In this case, the grinder that you'd use to squeeze the cane stalks. Otherwise, it's impossible to get.
Cane boils were conducted in South Georgia and Georgia at large, but that they never became a large-scale phenomenon. They were never done on an industrial scale. There was no factory that ever did that ever produced cane syrup. It was always done on farms just like this one.
There's a couple different types of grinders, but one that I'm most familiar with is you'd attach your mule or your horse or your ox, but usually a mule in this area, and attach it to the grinder and have it essentially spin around the grinder itself while sugar cane stalks are fed into it by hand.
Basically, these two rollers are held together very tightly by a couple of 1-inch threaded rods that run, well, there are 2 on the bottom and 2 on the top. And you pull them together, and you'll see that there's about 1/8 of an inch gap in there is all you need. And when you run a piece of cane through there, it squeezes the juices right out of the cane.
Mules, of course, have been around for millennia, but when tractors became common, especially after World War II, they started being phased out. Well, the mule wasn't essential to the cane boil itself, but it allowed us to explore an element that hadn't exactly been present for, at that point, 70 years. Because before tractors, mules were the ones who provided that power. And we wanted to bring some of that back for a day. that allowed us to see what our ancestors saw and what they experienced. Mules generally live for about 30 to 35 years. So she's getting up there in age, but she, a fairly large mule, but she seemed eager to work. She did a great job. Couldn't have been happier.
Yeah, I think that's what the kids.
What's interesting is, I was worried yesterday when I saw the pile of cane that it was going to be enough. It's always hard to know, how much. We've had, one that is very, it's probably twice the amount of cane that we've had in there, and it produces the same amount of juice. So clearly, obviously, we've had a pretty wet year, and so that, has made the cane very juicy, and so actually we've got more juice than what we need for the boil itself. So.
You're doing one or two things. You're constantly getting the impurities out of it, making it cleaner and cleaner, and you're thickening it up by boiling it, and the steam rising, and you're making it syrup's getting thicker and thicker. You learn good lessons, you learn hard lessons, you paid to mess up, and you didn't make that same mistake again. You take that ring and put it on there, and you'll put cheesecloth or rags. Old people would use tobacco sheets, and you'll bring it to a boil and let it boil over that ring, and boil over that ring through them rags and run back in the pot. And when it runs back in the pot, your steady filter getting more and more of them impurities out of it. You can take syrup. You can take syrup that's when it makes syrup and hold it up to the light. And if it looks real cloudy and nasty, you see a lot of stuff in the bottom of the bottle other than sugar. You'll know that you didn't do a very good job. In a minute, we'll bring it to a sure enough boil, or a lot of people call it a head. It'll be bubbles basically all the way across, and it'll go to boiling over this ring. When it boils over the ring, it'll run through these shirts back under that ring into the pot. It's still climbing right now. It's at about 215 right now. That whole thing come from Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah, I know. I don't have one. It's been sitting there for a year.
Well, it's got enough impurities in it that it leaves favorite part of the process was to be the finished product. Mom puts it in baked beans, and that's pretty good. I put it on pancakes, put a ham in the oven, and rub the ham down good. It makes it have a sweet taste. Cathead biscuits are very good. People were taking cathead biscuits and poke a hole in it, pour syrup in it.
One thing that I saw in this cane boil is that members of the community came out and basically spent time together. It became a community-wide family reunion of sorts.
It brings back memories. Hopefully it's good ones. You're cooking a better syrup in my mind.
apologize. I was told to not run the battery down on the microphone. Steve Gordon, he runs a cane boil at the Kiwanis Fair every October. So this fall, I asked that we go down and show him support. The final component of my project is a proposed historical marker. This marker is intended to help commemorate the Mule Barn owned by the Walter family just outside Statesboro. This Mule Barn, constructed around 1918 by the businessman Morgan Olive, is one of the last remaining structures that directly participated in the history of mules and the mule trading market in Bulloch County. As of last week, I submitted a proposal and proposed market text to the Bulloch County Historical Society for consideration in its historical markers program. Ensuring the future of this barn and artifacts and mules in Bulloch County is essential towards preserving our history for future generations to appreciate. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
We've got just a few moments, I think, for questions, or if you really want to get into it, we can turn this into his defense of his project. I'll turn it over just for a few questions. Any questions for Tyler?
One thing I would like to do is we have several people in the audience that help with this. I know Tyson Davis. Where's Tyson? Right there. He's with ComArts and Kelly Berry, and your people help produce this. Please stand. Who else is here that help? Of course, we couldn't have done any of this without the welters, which I've already introduced. And I'm probably looking straight at somebody that's on the video. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. And Don Sparks has had 1,000 cane boils. Yes, sir.
Could you have a show of hands of those that actually plowed a mule on the farm?
Hey, yeah, I've been behind.
Right. Kelly Berry, you plowed a mule. Yes.
And I have a question. Okay, now we're going to see who had the longest memory in here. How many of you remember the name of your daddy's mule? Okay, get them out. All right, now I'm going to test this. You guys help me figure out who had the nicest mule name. Start with this gentleman.
Katie.
Oh, whoa, that's bad news. My favorite mule was Kate. Yeah, that's excellent. Red. Next.
Named after his two younger brothers, Jack and Bob.
Oh, I like that.
Jim and Harry.
Jack and Bob.
Daddy had 7 mules, but I remember Pat.
Really? How about eeny, meeny, miny, mo? No. That's it. Molly and Pete. Marley and Rhoda. Molly. Anyone else? Yeah. Homer. I like Homer. Who else? Anyone else?
Isn't this wonderful?
How many of you remember the name of your tractor? You see how that works? The mules were more personal than a tractor. I say so right now.
But, I hate to ask his lead professor to give him all the accolades. But Tyler, we've had through the years, I don't know how many fabulous graduate students, but you get the A++++.
Yeah.
Any other comments? I love a syrup boiling. I just love one. Maybe I'll be invited to the Welters next year. Sherry Ball.
I got a question for Tyler. One thing I didn't see in any of your pictures, but I remember from my great Uncle Archie's house, when they had it out in the side yard, when they would strap up the mule, there was something on the mule's harness that went
Actually, I learned how to harness that mule the night before on a YouTube video.
I love that.
Oh, that's priceless. I'll never forget this program. He learned how to harness a mule on YouTube. Did you tell me to do that?
No, but I will say that Erlene, the mule that he found. So it's extraordinary. There are a lot of.
Is y'all's mule?
No.
No.
Yeah. So.
Y'all don't have a mule?
So there are a lot of mules out there these days, but finding a trained mule is pretty rare. And so you spent how long looking for?
It was a month, and then it ultimately, Carrie ended up finding Erlene through a mutual friend. Just south of Augusta, farmer Cecil Elliott.
But I will mention, Erlene was smart enough. She didn't have a stick with a carrot on it. We do it differently at Georgia Southern. We just gave him a bucket, and he walked as many miles as Erlene did. So.
I saw that. I love that. I got to mention before we knew that Tyler was our program today, Bill and I were in Thomasville at a museum, a conference of Georgia museum people a couple of months ago, and we went to Pebble Hill Plantation, had a private tour. It's fabulous, thanks to Brent and his board of directors. Bill's favorite thing at Pebble Hill wasn't the architecture or the flowers or the china, it was the mules. And they had gorgeous mules and a mule barn. If y'all haven't been, you have to go. Carrie, you have to go. I know that I'm being redundant. I want to give this young man another round of applause. And please come back, and we're going to give you a free membership in the Bulloch County Historical Society, something every college graduate needs. I just want to remind you, fourth Monday, or the last fourth Monday of next month, please join us. I've got 3 boyfriends presenting, and their sum age is 284 years. And they are Rodney Harville and Edwin Akins and Jack Henry. So it's going to be fabulous. The history of the Statesboro JCs. And I'm going to just throw this out. My daddy was a retired wrister, and you can come next month and find out what that means. Thank you so much for coming. It was a great Monday. Bye.